Hello. An Ordinary Night in December is a short vignette of a night on call for Dr. Alice in a major general hospital when everything that happens is, in fact, not ordinary for the patients admitted to the hospital. It's a very significant night for them. So let's get started. An Ordinary Night in December, Lonsdale St, Melbourne, 1980. Queen Victoria Hospital, December 22nd, 7:30 p.m. It seems quiet tonight, I thought to myself as I was walking to one of the medical wards to see a patient. She is a 94-year-old lady in mild cardiac failure, Annie Beaver. As I entered the ward, I heard carols being sung. A group of 9 carol singers were at the far end of the ward singing Silent Night. It was beautiful. Everyone stopped to listen and appreciate the gift these singers had brought to the patients and staff of the hospital. After they left the ward and moved on to another part of the hospital to sing more carols, I went over to Annie. "Hello, Mrs. Beaver. I'm Dr. Werner. I'm on duty tonight to look after you. How are you feeling?" "Not bad," she said in a quiet voice. "I just want to sleep, thank you." I respected her wishes after a brief examination, and I went back to the nurse's station. "Does she have any relatives?" I asked the nurse. "Only a son, aged about 60, who lives in Darwin. And she hasn't seen him for years, apparently. She's been living alone and is very independent, it seems." While I was writing up her notes, my pager rang, and the nurse asked me to come to coronary care for an admission. 8:30 p.m. Mr. Collins was a 64-year-old man with an abnormal heart rhythm that I wasn't too sure about. The rhythm, that is. He had been having a run of AF, or atrial fibrillation, in casualty that had spontaneously resolved, but he had an abnormal ECG and was admitted for monitoring. Was it Wolf Parkinson White? I thought. I wish the med reg were here to ask. He's really smart. He would know. I guess I'll have to ring Dr. June Harvey. I dialed her home number. I knew she lived close by in East Melbourne. She was a single lady, aged about 57 years, and one of the hospital's senior consultants. She was the coronary care unit director. One of the really good things about working at Queen Vic and being female is that many of the consultants are women. It started originally as a hospital for women and children, run by female doctors. Now it was a major general hospital in Melbourne, affiliated with Monash University, but still had many women doctors on staff. This was not the case at the time in the other large Melbourne general hospitals. I dialed her number and it rang out. That can't be right, I thought. I know she's rostered to be on call tonight. She was actually unofficially on call every night as director of the unit. And she had told us to call her whenever we thought we needed her. I called again. This time she answered on the 3rd ring. "Yes, what is it?" she said with slurred speech. Oh no, I thought. She's been drinking. I know she doesn't like me for some reason, so this is going to be difficult. "Hello, Dr. Harvey. It's Alice Werner here. I'm ringing from the Queen Vic. We have a patient here with an irregular heart rhythm. Can I discuss it with you?" "Can't you read a bloody ECG yourself, Alice? You've been the senior resident in CCU for months." "Oh, just 5 weeks, I replied. "Well, you should be able to read an ECG by now. Good night," she said in her angry consultant voice, and then she hung up on me. I did the best I could for Mr. Collins, and he seemed quite stable by 9:30 p.m. I passed by the residence lounge on my way to the on-call room. I'd missed dinner because the early part of the evening had been busy with calls. The cafeteria was closed now, so the only dinner I was going to get tonight was a Mars bar from the vending machine in the corridor outside the residence lounge. The on-call room was bare. There was a bed, a chair, and an old wooden wardrobe to hang our white coat in. I laid down on the bed, fully clothed of course, since I could be paged any time for an emergency and I would need to be there within a minute or two. My pager rang. I looked at the time. 1 a.m. I had fallen asleep all that time. I rang the switchboard. "Emergency, bed 2, medical ward west," the switchboard lady said in a monotone. I was there within 3 minutes. It was Mrs. Annie Beaver. She had arrested. The crash trolley was there with the night emergency team. I was in charge. The resuscitation went quite smoothly. I was confident with what I was doing now, and Annie Beaver came around soon, breathing and alive. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Beaver?" I asked, once the emergency team had all left and I was sitting by her bed holding her hand. She suddenly opened her eyes quite widely and said to me in no uncertain terms and quite indignantly, "You woke me up. You did that. I don't want you to wake me up again tonight. Do you understand?" She spoke like one of my old teachers had spoken to me in primary school. "I want to go to sleep now, and I don't want to wake up in the morning," she said. I understood what she wanted. I went into the nurse's station and I rang her son in Darwin, the only relative of hers that we knew. I explained that his mother had had a cardiac arrest. We'd resuscitated her, but she doesn't want to be resuscitated again, and was he okay with that? He said he was, and the nurse placed the "not for resuscitation" sign on the end of Mrs. Beaver's bed as I left the ward. 8:05 a.m. the next day. First thing, I headed straight to the coronary care unit for the morning ward round. It had already started. I was 5 minutes late. I stood quietly at the back of the group of about 8 doctors around the bed of Mr. Collins, who I had admitted the night before. "He's got Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome with a run of AF, according to the notes by Dr. Alice Werner. She's a good resident and knows her stuff," the coronary care registrar said to Dr. June Harvey. June replied in a loud voice, "Oh, I think she's just ordinary, actually. Alice, that is. Very ordinary. Now let's move on to the next patient." After the ward round, I went over to the medical ward to check on old Mrs. Beaver. The bed was empty, stripped of its sheets. Just a bare plastic-covered mattress remained, and no patient name on the head of the bed. "Died in the night," the young nurse said beside me. "She wasn't for resuscitation." That's the end of the story. Thanks for listening. For more stories in this series, they can be found at my YouTube channel at Dr. Diane Leslie Webster, or in the paperback edition of my book titled 4 Ways to Die at Riverside Towers, available on Amazon and Kindle. I hope you have a wonderful day today, spending some time with your loved ones.